Hey everybody, it's Rosaline, and today I'm going to do another game of riddles. And these ones are hopefully going to be a little bit more challenging. Let's see how many of you are able to figure them out. Also, before I get into this, I also want to mention that this time I have a few friends helping me along. One of them you'll probably recognize, and the other one is my dear little sister. A few days ago, I was invited to dinner at a friend's house. The strange thing is, my friend recently got involved with some weird religious cult. While I was there, he served up some type of meat, but he wouldn't tell me what kind of meat it was. It kind of freaked me out. For a second, I wondered if it was human meat. But then, after I ate it, I knew it definitely wasn't human.
I've lost 3 wives. Can you believe that? Let me tell you, alcohol is a very dangerous thing. My first wife was an alcoholic. She loved to drink wine. After we were married for 2 years, she suffered from alcohol poisoning and died. My second wife was also very fond of wine. Her death was caused by her drinking too. My third wife died in a very different way. She broke her neck when she fell down the stairs. She wasn't drunk though. She always refused to drink wine.
I'm a scientist. For years, I've been working on a chemical that turns water into alcohol. I think it's going to make me rich. All you do is put 1 drop of this chemical in a glass of water and it will instantly be transformed into pure alcohol. It works on tap water, well water, rainwater, anything that contains water. I think I've perfected it. Now all that remains is to see how it tastes. Let me take a sip. Tastes good. Exactly like alcohol. Nobody could tell the difference.
A man was just doing his job when he accidentally tore a hole in his suit. 3 minutes later, he was dead. Why? I live on the 8th floor of my apartment building. I always take the elevator. One day, when I came home from work, I heard something strange in the elevator. Kishi kishi. Kishi kishi. It was a weird scratching sound coming from the outside of the elevator. I listened to it all the way to my floor. Kishi kishi. Kishi kishi. It sounded like some kind of creature scratching the elevator with his claws. The noise sent shivers down my spine. Eventually, I got to my floor, and when the doors opened and I stepped out, the sound stopped. I went into my apartment. That night, around midnight, I was awoken by a low, dull sound.
There is a frog dead in the middle of an island. If he swims north, the distance to the mainland is 2 meters. If he swims south, the distance to the mainland is 3 meters. If he swims east or west, the distance is 4 meters. Which way should he swim?
Sometimes I wonder what the police are doing these days. They never seem to be able to solve any crimes. I live in a city that has a lot of crime, and lately it's been getting worse. Last week, there was a murder near the factory where I work. A woman was stabbed with an ice pick, not just any ordinary ice pick, but one with a skull and crossbones on the handle. Everyone who lives in this area is really freaking out. It's a big city, but the latest murder has everybody talking. It's pretty heavily covered in the media. My mother, who lives with me, is scared to go out at night. I keep telling her not to worry, but she knows the police are not going to solve the murder. They haven't even found the murder weapon yet. The police are so incompetent.
A few years ago, my older brother went crazy. He stabbed my sister to death and attacked my parents. The police managed to subdue him before he killed them too. He's been in a mental hospital ever since, and we never visit him. This morning we got a letter from him in the mail. The postmark was yesterday. I opened it, and inside I found a strange note. Tonight the wind blows colder still. All I know is darkness, never light. The pain will break strongest hearts. My dream still escapes my grasp. I couldn't make sense of it, so I went to the kitchen and gave it to my mother. As soon as she finished reading it, her face went pale, and the note slipped from her fingers. She rushed to the front door and started screaming.
My job means I'm always on a train. I was on the train again today when suddenly a woman appeared in front of me. I can remember her face clearly. It's really depressing.
I witnessed a horrible accident today. I wanted to cross the street and was waiting for the light to turn green when a man bumped into me. He didn't even say sorry. I was about to give him a piece of my mind and tell him to watch where he was going, but then I noticed he had a cane. He didn't seem elderly. There must have been something wrong with his legs. Just then, my phone started ringing. The high-pitched ringtone is really annoying. Before I could answer it, here was a screech of tires and a dull thud. The man who bumped into me was lying in the middle of the street in a pool of blood. His sunglasses were lying nearby, cracked and broken. The driver got out and yelled, "He just jumped right in front of me." The driver thought it was a suicide, but I thought the man was just clumsy and didn't look where he was going. It was his own fault. He should have been more careful.
There's an old vacant apartment building near me. The city is planning to demolish it soon. I often pass by it on the way home from work. A number of people have committed suicide there by jumping to their deaths. Because of that, they say the ghosts of the suicide victims still haunt the building. At night, the area is quite eerie because there are no streetlights. One night, I had to stay late at work, and it was almost 11 p.m. when I was walking home. I was passing by the apartment building, and it was creeping me out. Just then, I looked up and spotted a shadowy figure on the roof. I thought it was a ghost. My heart almost stopped. Then I took a closer look, and I could make out a person standing on the roof. All of a sudden, the person jumped. I watched as the figure fell to the ground and landed with a sickening thud. It was horrible. I rushed over and saw that it was a woman. She was laying in a pool of blood on the concrete. Her head was split open, and her arms and legs were twisted at odd angles. I immediately called an ambulance on my cell phone. The whole thing upset me so much. I was shaking, and I thought I was going to be sick. Some people must have heard the sound of her hitting the concrete. When I looked up, people in the apartment building were leaning over their balconies, trying to get a look. Soon the ambulance came and took her away. When I got home, I couldn't sleep a wink. I couldn't get the memory of that horrible scene out of my mind. There was an elevator in a high-rise apartment building. Too many people got on. The weight of the people exceeded the maximum weight capacity of the elevator. When it was coming to the top floor, the cable suddenly snapped. The elevator plunged to the bottom. I was going to call an ambulance, but that wasn't necessary. Nobody was injured. There was an old lady who had been living alone ever since her husband died. She was very lonely, and her children rarely visited. After a long time away, her eldest daughter came back to live with her. One day, they were watching TV in the living room when the news came on. There was a story about a woman who had been arrested for attempting to strangle her mother. "Such a stupid thing to do," the old lady said. "Yes," her daughter agreed. Strangling her mother was a stupid thing to do.
It's hard being a mother. I recently found out my son is psychic. He got this habit of pointing at people's faces sometimes. My husband and I realized that whenever our son points at somebody like that, it means they're going to die within 3 days. Last year, he pointed at his grandfather. 3 days later, his grandfather died of a heart attack. A few months ago, he pointed at a picture of a famous actress in a magazine. 3 days later, she was killed in a car accident. Today, when I went to turn on the TV, my son was pointing at the screen. When I turned it on, the president was giving a speech. I can't believe the president is going to die, but my son is never wrong.
There was a tunnel that was said to be haunted. 3 schoolgirls decided to go there one evening to test their courage. When they looked into the tunnel, it was pitch black, and the girls started to lose their nerve. They decided to hold hands and run through the tunnel. They ran through the darkness and didn't stop running until they reached the end. When they came out on the other side without anything happening to them, the girls were gasping for breath and laughing. "Holding hands made it less scary," one girl said. "I'm glad I was in the middle," said another. "Me too," said the third. There was a group of 8 college students who all belonged to the mountain climbing club. One day during the winter, they decided to climb the tallest mountain in the area. During the ascent, the weather took a turn for the worse. They ran into trouble and were stranded near the top for 2 weeks. Eventually, a rescue team managed to reach them. There were only 7 survivors. They were airlifted to a nearby hospital. After a few days, 6 of them made a full recovery, but the 7th survivor was so traumatized by the experience that he lost his mind and was put in a mental hospital. The police questioned the remaining 6 about what had happened during the 2 weeks they were stranded on the mountain. They asked what had happened to the missing climber. He just wandered off and never came back, they said. The police questioned each of the 6 survivors, and they all told the same story. Then they went to the mental hospital to question the 7th survivor, but they couldn't get any sense out of him. When they asked him what happened to the missing climber, he just kept banging his head against the padded walls and repeating over and over, 8, 8, 8. I found an ancient book on black magic. It explains how to put a curse on someone. This is what is written in the instructions. If you follow these steps exactly, the curse will be placed on the person of your choosing. However, if you make even one small mistake, the curse will be placed on you instead. So be careful. Do you still wish to proceed? Of course I do. I have an enemy. There is someone who I hate with all my heart, someone I wish would die horribly. I want to place a curse on this person. That's why I searched for this book of black magic. I want this curse to work, so I will follow the steps exactly. Step 1. Close your eyes and imagine the face of your enemy. That's simple. I couldn't forget this person's face even if I wanted to. Okay, what's next? Let's see. Step 2. Imagine the curse you want to place on your enemy and what it will do to them. I want this person to suffer the worst kind of pain imaginable. I want them to be suffering so much that they wish they are dead. Alright, what's the next step? Step 3. Open your eyes.
1. Violet's room with the small window. 2. Rose's room with the big window. 3. The tool shed. 4, 5, 6, 7. Rose. 2. Violet's room with the big window.
1986. A man and his family had won tickets to Fiji in a contest. The family was packed and ready, and couldn't stop chatting about what they expected to see on their holiday. About halfway through the flight, the plane had a critical engine failure. The plane plummeted towards the ocean, and the last things the man heard were the terrified cries of his children. The man awoke on a desert island. It was late afternoon when he got up and looked around. He heard cries coming from behind him, and when he turned, he saw his wife and the pilot sitting around a campfire. He ran over to them. The wife explained how they crashed, and all of the other passengers had died, including their children. The husband shed a tear. As they discussed what they were going to do, he noticed that his wife was missing a leg. It had been severed at the knee. He tried to tend to her injury, but the wound had become infected. She slipped into a coma and died in a matter of days. The husband and the pilot buried her body on the other side of the island. The pilot said a few words over the grave and they returned to the campfire. They sat there, thinking about how they would survive. Finally, the husband fell asleep. For the next few days, they sat around the fire, waiting for help to arrive. They knew that if they weren't rescued soon, they would starve to death. One morning, the husband awoke and smelled something cooking. Looking around, he saw that the pilot was cooking something over the fire. He said he had managed to trap an albatross and was making albatross soup. They managed to survive by eating the albatross soup until they were rescued. Many years later, the husband was still grieving the death of his wife and family. He went to a restaurant and ordered albatross soup, just for old times. As he put the first spoonful in his mouth, his eyes grew wide and the spoon fell from his hand. It tasted nothing like albatross soup. At that moment, he realized what had really happened on the island.
Recently, a number of murders have taken place in my neighborhood. There are rumors that it is the work of a serial killer. All of the victims were children, and they all attended the same elementary school. They were killed within days of each other, and the crimes were very cruel and brutal. They were found in such a state of mutilation that their corpses were not fit to be seen. Each child had to be buried in a closed casket. I knew the parents of one of the boys and had to attend the funeral to pay my respects. It was very sad and tragic. There were a lot of flowers placed on his grave. I noticed there were a large amount of clovers. When the funeral was over, I visited the graves of the other victims. I saw an old woman placing clovers on their graves too. She must have been at least 80 years old and seemed to be a kind, mild-mannered soul. With sad eyes, she quietly placed the clovers next to each headstone with a gentle smile. Then she made the sign of the cross, put her hands together, and said a silent prayer. I wondered if one of the dead children was her grandchild. As the old woman passed by, I said politely, "Do you mind if I ask you something? Why do you place clovers on all of the graves?" The old woman stopped and turned to me with a smile. "I always thought of clovers as a happy flower," she replied. "Also, it brings good luck. You see, my grandson died too." She had a pained expression on her face. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "Was he one of the victims?" "It was a separate incident," she said. "It happened at school. He was bullied for a long time. One day they pushed him too far. One of the teachers noticed he was missing. They found him in the school toilets. He had hung himself." There were tears flowing down the grandmother's face, and unable to speak any more, she turned and left. That evening I went home feeling very sorry for the gentle old grandmother. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Something was troubling me. I got up in the middle of the night and looked up the language of flowers in the dictionary. It said clovers were a symbol of revenge.